Hello everyone and welcome back to The Final Chicane with me, Cristinboylan. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me again for another race week, the Austin Grand Prix, which is actually one of my favourite race weeks because I feel like the vibes are just completely there. And you know what's special about this episode? I get to talk about Daniel Ricciardo again because he actually did stuff related to Formula 1. Not that that's ever stopped me before, but now I have like a reason to talk about him, so you can't give out to me for bringing him up. So we gotta talk about Danny Rick this episode. What a treat. What a treat for us all. I mean, we'll talk about the other drivers as well, but you know, not important when we have Daniel Ricciardo to talk about. Let's do the Final Chicane brain game. I keep going to call it the riddle of the week, but it's not a riddle this week. Was it a riddle last week? I can't remember. Wait, let me explain what this game is first. So, the game this week is that I'll give you 4 words and you basically have to find the connection between them. So actually this week I start with the words, but this week the first thing that came to me was the connection, and then I came up with the words. So this might be hard because I might have done this wrong, but we'll give it a go. And I wouldn't have got this either. I just knew this from researching it. So your 4 words are double diffuser, F duct, DAS, D-A-S, or blown diffuser, not or, and blown diffuser. So there's 4 words there. What is the connection between all 4 words? I'm sure there's more than one connection, but try to get the connection that I'm thinking of. And there is, to give you a hint, it's not like one way you could say it. That doesn't make sense. You know, whatever way you phrase it, I'll accept, you know? Anyway, I will go over properly why I've picked that and the connection at the end of today's episode. So until then, comment below if you want to guess at that connection. It's like Connections, the Final Chicane Connections game. Wait, that rhymed. It's been a fun week. It's actually been a fun month so far. Actually, it's a busy week. I'm graduating this week from my bachelor's degree in communications. So I'm excited about that. I honestly didn't think I'd graduate college. I genuinely didn't, because I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I actually didn't go to college for communications at first. I wasn't even going to go and try and do anything Formula 1 related because I just didn't think it was possible. You know, I just didn't think it was sort of realistic. And I actually did primary school teaching first. I went to do it and I lasted 4 weeks in that course, and then I dropped out. And I never thought that I would even, I didn't even think I was able to go to college again because I was so, I hated the first 4 weeks so much. I was miserable, the most miserable ever. And it was all because, which I didn't even realize at the time, but your mind always knows, it was all because I didn't want to do primary teaching. And I was just doing it because it was sort of an easy choice because, when my friends at the time was doing it. So I sort of tricked myself into thinking that's what I wanted to do. And that's not what I wanted to do. And your brain always knows that in the end, and sometimes you don't realize what your brain is telling you. But my brain was telling me to get out of there. And I did. And I did communications because I thought, well, I may as well try do something I love, and communications might get me somewhere in Formula 1, or at least build my confidence in this sort of stuff. This was all before I started the podcast as well. So now I'm graduating from communications, and yeah. And how this podcast came about was basically I was seeing my godmother, my auntie as well, for what we knew to be the last time. And I was sort of nervous to tell her that I was dropping out of primary teaching because she was a primary school teacher. And I told her, and straight away, what she told me was, for some reason, she's just always had faith that I'll do something that I love, or do something, just do something special for me. And it was after that my mind was set on communications, because I was like, I need to chase my dreams. It was what she said that literally made me realise I need to do what I want to do in life, and I feel like I can now because I don't know, whatever she put into that little speech she gave me changed my life for some reason. So yeah, Louise, is the reason behind this podcast, because soon after I decided to do communications, I then decided to start this podcast. And every time I'm thinking, oh, like, I can't do that, I'm not good enough talk or whatever, I always think back to her belief in me. So yeah, I don't know why I went on a rant about my like college and my inspiration behind starting a podcast, but I tend to do that on these episodes. I'm sorry, you know more about me than Formula One, probably, at this point. The Independent Podcast Awards were also last week, which I went to. It was in London, so I flew to London, which was fun. Obviously, I was nominated for Best Sports Independent Podcast of the Year for this podcast, The Final Chicane. And also, while I was in London, we got to try Charles Leclerc's ice cream, Lec. And yeah, it was really good. One of them tasted like the chocolate mousse that we got from our favourite restaurant ever. Actually, the restaurant is the top one there. I've probably mentioned it before. We literally have a picture of it hanging up in our house. It doesn't exist anymore. It was actually so sad. We were going there my entire life, and then we just came to Spain because we go to the same place in Spain every year. And then we came to Spain the first year after COVID, and it had closed down, and we had no idea it had closed down. So we were devastated, and we were just devastated. It was called the Steak and Rib Shack. It was in like Estepona. So if anyone knows, Juan, Julio, Antonio, any of our faves who worked there, let us know, because Steak and Rib Shack was our life. We literally wrote them a note as kids, me and Ellen and Sarah, my cousins, about how much we loved the restaurant as kids. So that's how special they were. But yeah, that's what Charles's ice cream tasted like. Again, with the stories, let's just go on to the Austin Grand Prix. Media for this Austin Grand Prix, we had George and Antonelli getting a contract extension. About time for George. I'm surprised that took so long. I don't know if maybe Mercedes were like holding back to see if there'd be any chance that if Red Bull didn't improve during the year, maybe Max would be looking to break his contract to go somewhere else. But I think that they realised, what's the point when they have two drivers as good as George and Antonelli on the team, and especially with how great of a run George has had this year so far. So they got a contract extension until the end of 26, so just a year extension. I feel like if I was George, I don't understand why George isn't getting long-term contract extensions. I don't know if that's a choice on his part, but I don't think so. I think George has said before that he wanted a bit more security in that, right? Or it might have been someone else, maybe it was Bottas or someone that said that. I'm just thinking Mercedes for some reason. Or was it Lewis when he decided to move to Ferrari? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I do think that George is still one of the most underrated drivers on the grid. And he's, it's not like he's badly rated. I just think he should be rated higher, I guess the other form of big news this weekend was that it was basically announced that Lando would be dealing with some repercussions due to what happened in Singapore with Oscar, and those repercussions weren't made public, but there was so much talk about them, and the word repercussions was the only thing out of McLaren's mouth like all weekend, and the media's mouths all weekend. What we did say, Zach didn't want to go into detail about the repercussions. He wanted it to stay private, but he did say it's something that the fans probably won't even notice. And I do think that it would be that. I mean, I wouldn't see the point of it being anything more extreme than that. And I'm guessing in that aspect it would be, Oscar having choice on who goes out first, maybe during qualifying. I wouldn't say anything to do with, I wouldn't say it leads on to like actual happenings during the race, like who pits first or whatever like that. I wouldn't, because that can really affect the race. That's a bit extreme for an accident. So I would say it's something to do with, who's giving the tow, who's getting the tow, whatever. Hopefully not. Hopefully just for like one race weekend. I think it is a little dramatic, to be honest. Lando did mess up and he did affect Oscar's race. But at the end of the day, it's still racing. And my main problem with what happened was that the team came on the radio to tell Oscar that oh, Lando had to go into you because he would have went into Max, like something along those lines, which wasn't even anything that Lando said himself. So I feel a little like it's a little dramatic, and maybe even if there were repercussions, like did we really need to mention them? I don't know if McLaren really needed to tell us that there was repercussions, because that's obviously just going to bring up a lot of drama and everything from McLaren fans and within the team, which is the last thing they need when the championship is potentially sliding away from Oscar and Lando very slowly, and still on the more unlikely side that it's not going to be one of those whose wins, but it's still possible that Max wins the championship, which I still think would be the funniest outcome ever. And I say this, like, I'm always the person who wants someone new to win the championship, and obviously Max has won it since 2021. So I still, and I love the McLaren boys, but I still think it would just be so funny if after all this drama, Max just sneaks it. What other news did we have? A bit of Alex Dunn news. We had Helmut sort of going back on what he said. Not really going back, but he said Alex wouldn't be with Red Bull in Formula 1 next year. A lot of people went sort of crazy with this and started panicking. From what I read, it was Formula 1 that he was talking about, right? So I don't think personally Alex Dunn is ready for Formula 1 next year. I think he absolutely needs to be with a Formula 1 team in some sort of program or reserve or testing, something in that sort of area, but another season in F2 wouldn't harm him at all, in my opinion. I don't think by Helmut Marko saying that he was ruling out the Red Bull junior program though, which I think a lot of people did think. I genuinely thought that he was just saying like Alex is not going to have a seat in Red Bull, as in take Yuki Tsunoda's seat, or in Visa Cash App or B, which I didn't think he was going to in the first place. So again, I don't think that's a huge panic, but also I did think that Alex leaving McLaren, like he had a plan that was basically set, and all he had to do was leave McLaren to discuss that contract or whatever. And now I do feel like he actually didn't have a plan when he left, and maybe because I don't know the ins and outs of his contract, but a lot of contracts in Formula 1 have that you can't talk or discuss with other teams while you're within that team. Lewis Hamilton was talking about how that's such a problem in Formula 1 now. I don't know if that's going to be if that's a possible contract thing to have in Formula 2 by, your Formula 2 supported team, McLaren. So I don't know, but I do think that it was still Alex's. I don't think Alex got dropped from McLaren. I still think it was, maybe it could have been a disagreement with something, but I do think whatever it was Alex's choice to leave in the end anyway. What's our first piece of Danny Rick news? Oh, when did he? I can't remember actually the context. Was it someone that just asked him? He was doing like a pop-up with his brand Ashante in Austin, which he also did last year, which was the race after like he got fired. So it was something seen last year, but he just loves Austin. Like he just wanted to be there. And he was asked if he would do racing again or whatever, and he said that he would do endurance racing with Max. If Max wanted to do an endurance racing, he would happily rekindle, what was his words, the teammateship, something like that. That's actually big news, because this is the first like inclination that Daniel has ever had to suggest that he would ever do anything to do with racing again. I mean, he's actually sort of said that he won't, so maybe he actually was lying. But this weekend was, I think, the first proper time Daniel's actually connected with Formula 1 and done stuff relating to Formula 1 since he left. So that was quite important. If you didn't see, basically Daniel had a thing with WhatsApp where he and two other drivers, one of them was Hunter Lawrence, I can't remember who the other one was, which is annoying me now, but he basically had a WhatsApp group chat, and during the race he was like sort of doing commentary in the group chat, and I didn't make it into the group chat because I don't know, there was a link that he posted, and to my favourite creators, I think, what is their names, Manion on Board or something like that, posted it, and It just wasn't working for me for a while, and then the group was full, so I couldn't actually join it. But I was just looking out for updates and everything on it. And yeah, he had a bit to say during the race and everything like that. So I will let you know that thread. I hope I took notes on what he said, but I actually can't remember if I did or not. So we should get into the actual racing. I guess we did enter this weekend with Colapinto and Juin as well, being the only two on 0 points, the only drivers without any points, with obviously Colapinto being the only one on the grid without any points. So it was quite an important weekend for Colapinto, but again, that didn't show. I don't know, how do you think you would be feeling if you were Jack Doohan right now watching you get replaced? I just feel like they didn't give Doohan a fair chance, but also like Colapinto for sure deserves to be on the grid and in Formula 1. But I'm still a little like, I still feel bad for Doohan because it's clear that it wasn't just a him thing. It's obviously not the easiest car to drive, and not only is it not the easiest car to drive, but it's not a very fast car either. So obviously it was a sprint race weekend this weekend, so as usual, a lot of drama. I do love a sprint weekend. I feel like we haven't had them in so long, but I always enjoy them when they do come along, and I know that they're stressful for the team and the drivers, and it's a lot of work and it's a lot of risk, but from a fan perspective, I do like watching them. Charles was lucky to make it out for sprint qualifying. He did have everything fixed back up. The traffic was such a problem. Honestly, I feel like out of all of the Formula 1 process, the one that would give me the most anxiety is like coming out of the pits and trying to get in line, because like I'd feel bad overtaking people in line, but you're such under time pressure. Like, you want to be the last over the line, but you also need to make sure you're over the line, and not everyone got over the line. Yuki being one of them, Bortoleto and Ocon also not making it to the line, and they were a bit off as well, because it's so intense when you know the little graphic that shows whereabouts the drivers are on track, and you can see the finish line here, and then they're like way over there and the clock is taken down. They weren't even that close to getting to the line, so obviously that was a mistake on their team's part. They just didn't get out quick enough. So obviously all three of them were out. P16 with Behrman, we had Colapinto P17, Sonoda, Ocon and Bortoleto. Bortoleto also got his first lap time deleted, so he didn't really even have a time in that session. Drivers were investigated for driving unnecessarily slowly during that at a time, but nothing came of that. There was no further action in relation to that. But yes, queuing was a big problem, and it continued a bit of a problem. Ferrari were really struggling throughout sprint quali, although Charles was doing some very smooth and very clean laps. But yeah, he just doesn't have that one lap pace actually in the Ferrari, which is obviously essential in qualifying, but sometimes, you know, it can aid him in the race, because he does work a little better in race conditions this year with this Ferrari, even though usually qualifying driving style is one of Charles' strong points, but just not in this car right now. We had Lawson out with no time. We had Stroll P14, Gasly 13, Hadjar as well P12, and Antonelli 11. So Hadjar hasn't been having the weekends that he would want to be having recently. His form, I don't know, he seems to be struggling in sort of things that he wasn't struggling at the start of the season, but it also could just be an improvement of the cars around and sort of racing bulls being stuck in the development that they are in right now. So hopefully a few better weekends for Hadjar to come. And yeah, again, Hamilton in the Ferrari still struggling, but he was just about through, luckily. SQ3, actually, I think we had a few people who didn't come out. We had Russell, Sainz and Albon, who didn't even come out for a final lap, which actually shows how much Ferrari were struggling, because their times didn't even beat those who didn't come out for a final lap. They were still behind those three. Norris was looking quite strong in SQ3, and Norris did end up grabbing provisional pole at 1:32.214, while Hamilton out-qualified Leclerc, which is definitely something that confidence-wise Hamilton would have needed this weekend. But then Max put in the fastest first sector and just stole pole from there. He had a 1:32.143, and Piastri P3 3/10 behind Norris. So Norris was just the faster McLaren driver this weekend, and maybe pulling slightly cleaner laps. I don't know. I guess Austin just isn't the perfect track for Oscar, which is definitely not what he needs when he's trying to build that gap for the championship, which he hasn't been doing recently. We had Hulk again. Hulk just appears randomly in these places sometimes. P4, very impressive. We know what happens in the sprint, but still doesn't take away how impressive his qualifying was. So Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, Hulk. We had Russell P5, Alonso as well up there, which went a little more unnoticed with Hulk's good results. Sainz, Hamilton, Albon and Leclerc, so both of the Williams as well. And yeah, we really are seeing both Williams like more level with each other than we were at the start of the season and throughout the season, to be honest. Sainz is definitely more up there with Albon. I mean, qualifying Albon here. So, and obviously Leclerc P10 then. Not where he would want to be, but of course his weekend did get better from here. Ugh, the sprint, so dramatic. Both McLarens out. Now, first of all, I knew as soon as like Oscar was the one hit, and Oscar did end up taking out McLaren, what like X was gonna look like, with everyone being like, so what repercussions is Oscar gonna face now, blah 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 blah. My opinion on it, if I had to blame anyone, I think I would put the blame on Oscar. First and foremost, first lap instance, and I completely agree with that. But I think realistically, Oscar knew he wasn't going to get through there. The whole thing, if you don't go for a gap, you're no longer a racing driver, whatever. But even from the onboards, like I thought it looked quite clear that Oscar wasn't going to make it through that gap. And maybe he didn't know that Alonso was going to come in and push Hulk. Again, I think Hulk was just a passenger in it as well, but I think Piastri was being a little brave going for that move. Obviously, I'm not an idiot. I don't think he had the intention of taking out Lando, which some people think he did. Some people were like, is it just me, or does it look like he purposely steers into Lando? Like, girl, his car was half in the air. He had no control of it at this point. But yeah, I don't think it was penalty worthy, given that it was a first lap incident. And all the cars, you know, when they're so bunched up like that, I think you just have to know that it's not always worth the risk if the risk is that you're going to be taken out of the race, you know. So it was unfortunate that Lando was just a passenger in that. He got taken out, as did Piastri. I think Alonso also sort of knew that by him moving to where he moved, it would have probably caused some issues there. But again, this is all happening in a split second. Like, you're rewatching it on TV and you have time, because you know what happens. You have time to, like, hindsight, you know, great thing. So when you're a racing driver, I'm guessing that these things, you see a gap, you're like, okay, let's go into it. And maybe you don't have time to process what will happen if you do that. But yeah, and Lando did say, like, Oscar was hit. He didn't go into Lando to avoid Hulk. He was hit and then he went into Lando, which is the difference, whereas it was more like Lando went into Oscar to avoid hitting Max previously. But yeah, Oscar was hit into Lando. So no, there shouldn't be repercussions for Oscar. Didn't really think there should be huge repercussions for Lando either for Singapore, but there was, apparently. But obviously disappointing for Hulk as well, and for Alonso, who started obviously a lot higher than they would usually, but that just seems to be the way. Oscar did have suspension damage, so yeah, he really had no hope of continuing. I know Zach has actually went back on his comments there, but he was basically saying that it was like an amateur move from, I think he blamed Hulk, was it? He was sort of like the drivers at the front, so I think he was sort of alluding more to Hulk and Alonso. But he did take it back, which, yeah, I wrote that I didn't agree with it. But yes, Zach did confirm that once he watched it back, he didn't agree what he said himself about that. I wrote a note here saying Yuki up from 18th to 17th. That's not right. Yuki was up from like 18th to like 7th. I swear, did I accidentally put in a 1 before that? Because I wouldn't have wrote down a note that Yuki gained 1 place like that. But he did run over debris, and did you see the onboard? Whose car was the onboard from? I don't know, but it's just Yuki speeding along with, like, I don't know what it is, like some part of a front wing plate or something like that, completely under his car. But yeah, I think Yuki was up to the top 10 at this point, and that's just a a mistake from my part. Charles, quite a good start. He managed it quite well. Behrman also up to P8 actually. So did he start behind Yuki? Let me see. Behrman started P16, so he was up to P8. So I'd say that was supposed to be P7 maybe that I wrote for Yuki. I just accidentally put in. So the safety car did end around lap 5 from that first turn drama even. As the safety car was ending, George did have that brave sort of dive, but it didn't really work out. They sort of both went off, and then the Stroll and Ocon crash. To be fair though, Stroll, okay, so he went for like a Danny Rick-esque move. Didn't work out for him. He knew like straight away. I think he knew before he even hit Ocon that he was going to take Ocon out and that it was a mistake on his part. He apologised like straight away. I'm pretty sure before the car even stopped moving, he had his hands up, so he did take full blame for that. And it was an accident. Accidents happen. He got a 5-place grid penalty, quite a big grid penalty for that. Someone, because you know how Lance was driving on like 3 wheels, which obviously he knows you're not allowed to do, and we all know that too, you're not allowed to drive in an unsafe condition, but someone was like, no, he literally drove so he could get a bit further away from Ocon to save like the awkwardness of having to get out of the car and be beside someone you just crash into, which is the most relatable thing I've ever heard, if that's actually what he did. But maybe he didn't realise he was missing a tyre and was just like trying to get back to the pits or something. But yeah, we had Lance and Este out after that. Safety car again, lap 16. Ollie Behrman, to be fair, was putting everything that he could into that race, but he did leave the track and gain an advantage quite obviously as well. I'm not sure why the team didn't pull him up on that, but he did get a 10-second penalty for that, which of course dropped him, I think, to last probably. And the sprint ended up with Max winning, Russell P2 and Sainz P3. Again, a really impressive drive from Sainz, with Albon just 2 places behind him. We had Hamilton P4, Leclerc P5, Albon, as I said, P6, Tsunoda P7. So a great drive from Tsunoda to get into the top 10 after that. Antonelli and finally Lawson as well. A good drive from Lawson to get up there. He started behind Hadjar. How did he get? He finished in front of Hadjar. I've only noticed that now. But he didn't start in front of Hadjar. Speaking of Hadjar, actually, come qualifying, his weekend did end up getting a little worse. He had only been out of Q1 once before this weekend, I believe, but obviously he had his second exit of Q1. He went into the barriers. Big hit. Big enough hit that the medical car was called, but he was fine, luckily. But still, that was, of course, him out with, I think, a good 14-15 minutes still to go of the session. I think Norris was looking a bit more messy at the start of this qualifying session. He had a lap like 7 minutes to go that just didn't look great, but so I was a bit worried about how the rest of the session would go. But of course, it was fine. Lando did pull it together. We had P20, Hadjar out, Stroll and Ocon again, not where you'd want, but obviously Stroll with his 5-place grid penalty, he wasn't going to push too hard, knowing that, you know, he'd probably be starting P20 anyway. Bortoleto and Colapinto. So Bortoleto getting up there a little bit more than in the sprint qualifying session because of his lap time deleted and not making it to the line, but still he'd want to just be getting a bit further than that, especially considering how Hulk did in the first sprint qualifying. Tsunoda was in the pits, and then Albon, who just looked like he got through, actually got his lap time deleted. He went off turn 15, which I didn't think it was turn 15. What he went off at, I wasn't even looking at that one, so he actually did go off there. I thought he went off right at the end as well, though, maybe. But yeah, he got his lap time deleted, so he moved from P8, I believe, to P19, which lets Colapinto back into Q2. Q2, Yuki out. We had Russell not doing the final lap. I think Verstappen and Leclerc boxed when they realised that they would probably be safe anyway. We had Hulk out, which was pretty unfortunate considering his run in sprint qualifying. He had lap time deleted, and basically no one who was in the bottom actually ended up getting out of the bottom during the last lap. So P15, Colapinto, Gasly, Tsunoda, Lawson and Hulk. Q3 was when we thought maybe we saw some of the repercussions that McLaren might have been talking about, because Lando went out first, which you would think wouldn't be the most favourable time to go out, but it did end up working in Lando's favour, but also Lando was just having a better weekend than Oscar. So maybe if Oscar was having a better weekend, that would have, made more of an advantage for him, but Lando was just having the better weekend. Max was on provisional pole and he was cutting it close and he didn't make it to the line. So more bad judgment, and I was sure that would lead him to not getting pole, but it's Max, you have to remember. So of course he did end up getting pole anyway without doing the final lap. Behrman got his lap time deleted. Yeah, Piastri mainly went wrong on sector 2, which obviously ended up with him finishing P6. Norris P2, still 2 tenths behind Max, with Max not doing the final lap, which probably isn't going to be the best feeling for McLaren going forward and definitely going into the race. But I think what was important for Lando there was beating Piastri, and he did quite significantly. Leclerc also in P3 was very impressive, given how the Ferraris were looking earlier on the weekend. So they both sort of pulled it together a bit more for the last qualifying. Verstappen P1, Norris P2, Leclerc P3, Russell P4, Hamilton P5, Piastri, Antonelli, Behrman, Sainz and Alonso finishing out the top 10. Yeah, the race. Some different strategies going into the race. We had Leclerc on softs. Used softs, I believe, though, and we had Verstappen and Norris on new mediums. So it was quite clear Ferrari saw that if they had a chance of finishing basically ahead of Verstappen and Norris, they would need to get him at the start, which seemed to work, but overall the McLaren did have more pace. I think from 4th to maybe 15th were on mediums, and then there was a few hards scattered there, but that didn't seem to be the best strategy. Didn't really make that much of a difference. I will say, actually, the crowd were loud. It's not often I hear the crowd from watching on the TV, but the crowd going through turn 1 were very loud. So the Austin fans were giving it this weekend. Charles had a very good start. Russell, though, with a bit of a more poor start. Lando had an okay start as well. Nothing wrong with the start, but Max just had a better start. And Oscar, a decent start as well. He got up a couple of positions. Oscar got up a position. Quite early on, a double waved yellow flag. Alex was spun by some contact with Bortoleto. Tsunoda actually had a good start. He was up 3 positions, which I think went a bit more unnoticed, but it was quite a good start, and it did sort of lead him to having a better race than maybe he expected. Oh, also, the battle between Behrman and... Who was he battling between? Behrman and... Yes, the battle between Behrman and Sainz was so clean. Like, it was so satisfying to watch. It was intense, but it was clean, and they kept it together. So I really respect that. Also the same with Norris and Leclerc's battle, because sometimes, it depends who Norris is against. If he's against Piastri or Max, the battle is like, you sort of have to look away because someone is going to get hit or some sort of contact. But they were like, the way I describe it, when they're battling like that, it's almost like they're ice skating. Does that make sense? Like they're figure skating, the way that they're sort of just gliding past and then in front of each other, and they're not making any contact. They're my favourite type of challenging and overtaking, sort of, even if it doesn't stick. I just love a good clean overtake. The track limits were there from the start. Lap 6 had already had a black and white flag for track limits, which lap 6 is not the time you want to be getting noted for that. Ocon actually got noted for a false start. I have that wrote down, but I haven't actually heard anything more about that. Have I missed that? I'll check it at the end of the episode. Oh, the production though was a mess. And, they don't always mess up, but especially coming off of last week when a few people were complaining that instead of showing Sainz's overtakes and everything, they were showing the garage, the girlfriends of the drivers, the family, whatever they were showing. But they decided to show the replays of the start, and not even just the start replay, but they were doing the onboards and everything while the Carlos and Kimi incident happened. So we were watching that on a tiny screen, and they didn't even cut back as soon as they realised. I guess maybe, see, I don't work in TV production, so I don't know if you can easily switch over when you have something queued, basically. But that was stressful to watch. So yeah, Carlos went down the inside of Kimi and ended up hitting Kimi. It was Carlos's fault. It was too risky, and I think Carlos knew that as well, and that brought out a virtual safety car. The battle between Norris and Charles definitely did get a bit more desperate from Norris's side. Every time he went into that one corner, did you see he had a bit of a flick of the steering wheel? Like, and I think it was a flick of the front of the car going out while he tried to keep it around the corner. So in that way, you know that he's literally putting everything into those corners to try and get anything he can over Charles. But obviously that did pay off, and sometimes you just have to be a bit more desperate with it for it to pay off when the drivers are defending and attacking so similarly that like nothing is going to happen. So Norris did end up getting Charles on lap 21. Pit stops took place around lap 32, with Max, the race leader, boxing at lap 34. A bit of a Yuki and Ollie incident. Why have I no recollection of any results of this? Because Yuki was 100% moving on the brake, and like that would have had to be a penalty. I don't know why I just somehow missed the results of all of this. We had another Norris and Leclerc battle around lap 51. Also going unnoticed, Antonelli was driving quite well. He was getting fastest laps, even though obviously he had the thing with Carlos. So he wasn't, up there, but he was still driving well. And yeah, Hajar did just seem to be struggling a little more during the race. He did have a good overtake, but still, just the struggle was there. Drama actually in Alpine, because Colapinto was told to hold position to Pierre Gasly, and he was very vulnerable to the car behind him, and he disobeyed team orders, which apparently the team were very not happy with. And on one aspect, like, he needs to prove himself, and he needed to prove that he could overtake, and you never know, maybe he felt that he could overtake and go and overtake ahead of Pierre. But when you're going for that seat, pissing off the team is probably something that you don't want to do. So I'm not sure if that was the right thing to do. It does show his determination though, like he's not giving up, even if he's not in a points position there. But yeah, he overtook and moved up to P17 anyway, and Max ended up winning the Austrian Grand Prix by just under 8 seconds, I believe 7.959 seconds. Oh, then the drama for Hamilton fans on the last lap when he seemed to get some sort of a problem. He thought that it might be a puncture, so that allowed Piastri to cover within like 1 second of him. But Hamilton did keep it together and he did maintain that position, finishing fourth in the end. So we had a Verstappen P1, Norris P2, Leclerc P3, Hamilton P4, Piastri P5, Russell P6, Tsunoda up there again, very impressive from Tsunoda. Hulk making it into the top 10, Berman making it into the top 10, and Alonso keeping that 10th position. So that result, obviously, and with Piastri finishing not third but a few more points down, is closing the gap. Max is only like 23 potentially points behind Lando, which is crazy if Max wins a Grand Prix and Lando DNFs. It is close. Like, it's not even extremely unlikely, because it's so easy for Lando to miss a Grand Prix, to DNF, and if Max wins that Grand Prix, like, it's not like it would be out there for Max to win it, and it's not out there for someone to DNF, Piastri DNFing and Max winning would close the gap so much as well. Anything can happen, to be honest. Oh, did you see that Red Bull? Red Bull are so sneaky. They got a 50k fine for removing the tape. So, like on the wall, I think McLaren put some tape on the wall to line up where Lando needed to stop on his grid box. And I think Red Bull just took it down to try and make Lando have a false start or something like that. But they were caught and they got a 50k fine. I just think that's sort of the funniest thing. I think I wouldn't have taken it down though. I would have moved it. Wait, did they move it or did they take it down? I would have moved it. So he because if it's not there, he's more chance of stopping where he needs to. But if it's moved, he'll just side eye it and be like, oh, I can go up a bit more. Gap between Verstappen and Norris is actually 40 points as well. So it's very little. I don't see anything about Ocon's false start. Daniel was quite funny in the WhatsApp group though. It was quite nice. He was he was like complimenting Yuki as well, Charles, obviously Max, what's new. He said that Max like had basically checked out the race and was ordering a steak or something for dinner, and then that night Max was spotted at like a steakhouse, so he knew. I wonder if they had dinner together. Alright, should we go back to the Final Chicane brain game? What did I call it earlier? The Final Chicane Connections game. Wait, that doesn't sound as cool as I thought it did earlier. Okay, so what was the connection between double diffuser, F duct, DAS, and blown diffuser? Basically, they are all techniques related to aero innovations, and driver control systems that the teams basically introduced to exploit the rules. Like sort of sneaky things that the teams introduced to, you know, paw over the line of legal and illegal sort of stuff. They're all controversial sort of parts anyway. Double diffuser was basically an interpretation of the 2009 aero rules with Braun and a few others, which basically gave a big downforce advantage, which resulted in the regs obviously being tightened a bit later. F-duct was in relation to McLaren 2010 stalled wing system, so the drivers blocked a duct to change airflow and drag, basically. It was banned in 2011. DAS, the dual axis steering, was Mercedes 2020 system that altered steering geometry by pushing or pulling sort of the wheel. It was legal in 2020 but banned from 2021 technical regs, and blown diffuser was using exhaust gases to energize the diffuser, which was obviously very effective around 2010, 2011, but later curtailed by, you know, exhaust engine mapping rule changes. So there were also things that teams did that ended up causing a rule change. That's a really hard one. And I'll be really impressed if anyone got that, but I did it so we could learn. Now you know what an F-duct, double diffuser, dual axis steering, blown diffuser. Now you know a bit more about that sort of stuff. Mexico is our next Grand Prix. That one is always on Halloween weekend because I usually miss it because I'm doing something on Halloween, but I actually don't have plans for Halloween this year yet. So let me see. Is it next weekend or this weekend? 24th. Oh my god. It's this weekend. Yo, I didn't think that was this weekend, not gonna lie. Oh, I have to do my cooking again. Do you guys watch my cooking challenge? I think it's like my least liked and viewed videos all the time, but I like doing it, so I keep doing it. And then it's the ones that people keep commenting being like, oh, this is my favorite thing. Even like, so the 20 likes are worth it because it's fun. I didn't know Mexico was this weekend though. That's sooner than I thought. I thought I had another weekend. That's okay though. Do we have nothing on Halloween weekend then? No, we don't. We have Halloween weekend free for once. Wow. Right. I feel bad for getting this episode out a little later then. But yeah, that's it for me this weekend. And I will see you for Mexico. I'll see you for my cooking challenge. Watch it this weekend. Mexico. Bye.